Welcome back. In this, our last lesson, we're going to talk about the bigger picture, the art of storytelling with your sketches, what sometimes is called reportage. So we're going to be looking at three things: keyframing, the idea of directional flow, movement through your sketches, and pulling focus, drawing the attention with spots of color. So when I talk about keyframing, I have some examples here. This is a term from animation. The keyframers were the artists that would draw the best poses, and that's what you're looking for. The sketches that have the most unique description of an event. So I have some drawings from a day mountain climbing. I don't climb, but my friends were climbing and they invited me out to sketch in the Rocky Mountains. They're working, doing sport climbs up and down the walls. So it's a bit of a repetitive motion that I can draw over and over and pull out those sketches that are most descriptive of the event. So here we have an example of these kind of poses of clinging onto the wall, the stretched out, bracing yourself against the wall, and I'm drawing the gear and the helmets, little clues about what's going on in this scene. So this kind of thing, where you get the posture that's unique to each person and to this particular sport. So these are the kind of sort of Spider-Man poses that you don't see in anything else. And I've put in the two different styles of the different climbers. She's taller and has a longer reach. So I'm emphasizing things like the time-lapse motion of her hands, trying to find the spots in the climb, the next point to grab. Whereas the other climber has to almost shinny up and use her feet to get up this angle as they were going through the same spot. So these are great examples of unique little sketches that are telling the story of each person's battle with the wall. And the idea is to never repeat yourself. If you're there and you only have a couple of minutes while you're drawing, you don't want to do the same thing over and over. You want each drawing to be different, to kind of advance the story. And you're looking for opportunities like this one here. There's a version of one of those climbers I didn't like as much, and I had this character who's the belayer. These are, if you see something you want that information, but you don't necessarily like the sketch, then I'll go back, because that piece of storytelling was important to me. So I wanted to really make sure I got that one. So the belayer is almost the partner of the climber above. They're controlling the rope and doing safety. So it's an important part of the climbing. It's something I didn't know how it worked, and I get a good close-up shot of their gear. So I'm really documenting with this pose. This is the one that tells the rest of that story for me. So that's that art of like finding what are the key frames that, when they're put together in a sequence, are really descriptive of an event. So you're drawing the right things using the time you have. I'll have another example. I found out these people in Montreal that had a collective. They do beehives, and in fact, it's on the rooftop garden in downtown Montreal. So that's interesting, fascinating, just to be up there on a garden up in the sky. So they invited me to come down and sketch live when they opened the beehives for the first time after winter. So it's actually a bit of suspense. The question is, how is the health of the hive? They could open it up and everybody's dead in there. So it's the first time they'll find out, and I'm there recording it. So we go down, and this is the first frame of the action, the first page of the sketchbook, a little bit of the establishing shot of where I am, which is like when I include props or just a grounding line, that's the environment. And they're going about their business. And I'm trying to find a sequence of events. So first they dress in their spacesuits, their protective bee suits. I don't get one of these suits, they do. But I'm drawing with the bees buzzing around me while they're protected in their gear. But and they have this little gadget's going to come in play later. So they go about the business of opening the hives, and what they're doing is they're counting. They're counting how many bees are surviving, and they're looking for the queens, which are actually marked with a little dot of nail polish. So there's a little red dot on the living bee, and they're looking to find that one. So these poses are very distinctive of the way they're manipulating the frames that are covered in bees. I really liked this sketch because it's how I would feel with this rack full of squirming bees 2 inches from my face. It's a posture that I think is really descriptive. So that's the sequence of events, one by one, as I turn through the action. Here we have them using the smoker, this little magic teapot they use to, for some reason it calms the bees. I would think it would antagonize them. But so in this one page, we see how by placing the right keyframes, we get an activity that's interesting, paces out the sequence of this happened, then that happened, then this. So that's the secret of combining your drawings, linking them together. So when I open that one sketchbook, it's like a little movie, a little documentary film. So up next, we're going to talk about directional flow. So the idea of directional flow, if you think about it, it's like reading. A sketchbook feels like a book, looks like a book. We want to read it like a book. So as we open, we're going to read left to right in a natural fashion. So I've arranged the drawing so that you come into that side, and there's a little bit of these characters are the greeters, something going on there to draw you in. And then immediately we get into the activity in the scene. And it's going to lead, it all is designed to lead you in that direction. So you have to decide as you're composing your page, what is the most important thing? The most interesting character is the guy with the smoke, this swirling smoke. That's the rock star, like I was talking about before with the soccer players. One figure is the key guy and the rest are the residual characters. So you'll come into this side, and there's even the watercolor wash in the background emphasizes that arrow of motion that leads you from one character to the next to the next. And it seems really obvious that we're going to flow from that main guy through here into the next character. It's just natural that that's the proper direction of movement. So that's the most simple thing you can do to keep that storytelling flowing, taking you across the page to make you want to turn the page and see the next thing. So here's an example of just doing that in my little sketchbooks. These are the Scribblers, a blown up version of the little books I carry with me everywhere, which is the key part of the homework for these classes. So it's the same kind of composition, but something that's really attractive to us is faces. It's very natural for humans to want to look and see the characters and look at the people in the scenes. So it's almost like the heads are the guide, are the landmarks that you're looking at as you go through the picture. So we have this guy to introduce us in our reading direction. He's on his phone. He's very intensely playing a game on his phone. But this handsome lad that's the largest, kind of in that golden section of composition, that's the main character. So you're drawn right away to this fella. But then the composition will take you from head to head. And then that's sort of an odd thing on this edge here. I call this guy, he's almost the full stop. That his weird cropping causes your eye to stop there. But I think that there's a subconscious effect that you look back in the direction that he's looking, and it flips you to that last little hidden girl that's fused with his body. So there's a flow through these characters, and then, oh, I found one more person. She's doing something, and they're reading the phone. And it brings you back to our star. So the composition subconsciously focuses you in this interesting little way, even in a tiny little book. This book is half the size of that. You can do that storytelling on the page. Or, this is an even simpler example, the shot of this guy, he's a journalist. I'm at the court, and he has to file the story while we have a few seconds in the break, and then I'm going to go back in and draw people in the courtroom. All of his little gear spread out on the table while he's frantically typing are like those breadcrumbs that I was talking about before with brushstrokes. They lead you up his cables, his glasses, his typing hands, and then his intense face. And so that's directional flow in perspective into the picture. Another way to pull the eye. This is an example, it's a little bit different way of doing it. I call it using gaze, using where the characters are looking. So it's a caveat of that, or it goes along with that idea that you always want to look at people's faces and you want to see what are they doing. So what they are looking at in the picture, the acting your drawing is doing, is going to be telling you a little story. In this case, it's an exhibit in the Museum of Fabergé eggs, these little tiny, beautiful gold and silver jeweled eggs. So I thought it was funny that you have this little object and everyone is crowding around trying to see what is that fascinating thing, and they're all taking pictures. So every character is looking directly at the center of interest. Even this guy in the background who's peering between the characters, his eye line goes right to the golden jewel in the center. So you're drawn in by the central focus and the acting of all the characters, where their gaze is. Even though that thing is the smallest on the page, it's the most focal point. And here it is again with a different set of poses. This is another good example of keyframing. I'm looking for, as all these people are milling around, all the little poses that tell the story. So today we have cell phone photography, the different, the old guy and younger characters, the ambiance of all these people in this crowded exhibit. But every one of them, even the people in the distance, have a direct eye line to that object in the center. This guy was right up against the glass, trying to get a super close look at it. So there's that laser focus towards the center based on where characters are looking. So, next example, I'm going to talk about pulling focus with color. So this example of pulling focus. This is a kind of sketch I call a heads and hands sketch. That you have the character and what he's doing. They're the smallest kind of story in your sketchbook page. This guy and the time lapse of what's going on. So here you can see the eye is drawn to the face, to the color in the isolated sketchbook page, and the direction of his gaze is pointing you right at what he's doing. He's a metalsmith working in the jewelry shop, making rings and that sort of thing. So we have all kinds of these wonderful props, but they're secondary to the action that's going on in that package of color. So it's really clear the way the eye is drawn to the guy, his portrait, who he is, and what is he doing. That's the order of priority. And then here I have a little bit of the tools, the third priority. So that you're stacking the order that you want your attention drawn to. That's what I mean by pulling the focus around the page. This is another way to create a kind of directional flow and tell a story with a composition of drawings. I just want to show a little example of something else here. Here's another fellow who's working on a jewelry type task. He's a lamp worker melting glass on an open flame, and I really did not get a good sketch here. So this is my point here is about persistence. It's kind of a rough drawing of him. So what I did is immediately draw it again. Even though you have the idea, you got to be satisfied. And I didn't really get his character, and I still didn't think I had it. So I immediately did it again. So the right attitude, I want to just say this thing about persistence and not giving up is the main thing to learn from any of this aspect of drawing. I finally get a guy who's a unique character. He's got a nice individual face. He's not a generic kind of sketch, but a portrait. And yet I'm also showing what he's doing, the detail of this device that spits the flame, and a few little props of the glass rods and things he's making. So yeah, just a point about sticking with it if you're having trouble. But back to pulling focus. So here's an example from the Croissant Festival in Montreal. This is a great little event. They give away free croissants to bring you into the cafe. I enjoyed it, covering that one. So the thing that is the order of business on this page is the character with her face. So I've finished her in color. She has the brightest color with the red. Your eye is going to go straight to her as number one, and then all this tasty food is a very natural second read, and it's in the correct direction of natural reading direction, and it's detail you're interested in. So there's that number one, number two focus, and then there's the ambiance of the room, all of the people that are getting their food in the background. So you have that hubbub of the busy cafe. It was packed that day. It's a very successful festival, so I want to get that feeling across. But as I'm skating the eye back through here, there was one little bit. I gave this little piece of color. This fellow who's carrying his dog backwards under his arm, that was just the funniest thing, this little ambient thing. You wouldn't, when you went out that day, that's not something you ever expected to see. I like to grab these pieces of life that surprise you and highlight that in the drawing. So I gave him a spot of color. Even though he's not the main story, he's part of the background, part of the life of that scene. So choosing where you want the person to look, how you want to tell the story. Yeah, that's pulling focus. And then here is an example where everything is together. So this big sketch is at the Corning Museum of Glass. I was watching the artisans at work doing glass blowing in front of your eyes. So it's this fun activity. There's heat and flame and the colorful glass. And there's four of them working at the same time. So I'm in this sketch, I'm getting everybody on the stage in the one drawing. So this is all about this idea of keyframing. When you're looking at the swirl of activity, each pose should be a unique part of the story. I mean, you're tempted sometimes, you come home with a lot of drawings of the people standing around in the background because they're easier to draw. But you have to push yourself and find the thing that is going to advance one frame by frame, the animation in your mind of the story, the little movie of the event. So I like to think of it like documentary filmmaking. So it all comes together, one sketch at a time, creating a directional flow, drawing you to the center. The greatest amount of detail, the most darkest contrast is in the middle, and it fades off both in detail and in amount of color towards the edges. So everything that we've done all throughout the course is in play in this final drawing. That's all of it together. So when you go out into the world and you find subjects you want to document and show to people with your sketches, hope to see some of this.